Chapter 1. The Forgotten Archive. The jungle of Zareth was alive, buzzing with sounds that hinted at a vast, interconnected ecosystem thriving just beyond sight. Towering trees with glowing leaves arched over Dr. Elias Carter as he trudged through the dense underbrush. The luminescent foliage bathed the path ahead in shades of green and gold, illuminating the expedition's trail toward the ancient Arkini temple. Elias swatted away a cloud of iridescent insects, his pack bouncing lightly against his back as he adjusted his grip on the heavy equipment strapped to his shoulders. His heart raced not from exertion but from anticipation. Somewhere ahead lay the ruins of a temple that had been untouched for centuries. It was a place where time itself seemed to have stopped, a monument to a civilization whose greatest secrets were buried beneath layers of mystery. Beside him, Lyris Vanna moved with practiced ease, her shimmering blue skin blending seamlessly with the jungle's natural hues. Her bioluminescent markings pulsed faintly along the sides of her arms and neck, their soft glow reacting to her emotions, or she kept them subdued. As an Arkini historian, Lyris had spent years studying her people's history, but the notion that a human species whose galactic membership was only a few decades old could uncover anything of value struck her as naive at best. "I still can't believe the Coalition sent you," she said, her tone sharp but not overtly hostile. She stepped over a fallen log with effortless grace, glancing back at Elias, who was struggling to keep up. "We've been studying this temple for decades. What makes you think you can uncover something we missed?" Elias took a deep breath, choosing his words carefully. He had dealt with skepticism before being a human linguist in a galaxy dominated by older, more advanced species often invited condescension, but Lyris's tone carried an edge that felt uniquely personal. "Because language is like a puzzle," Elias said finally, pushing a low-hanging branch out of his way. "It evolves, but it never truly disappears. Traces of your ancestors' language likely survive in your modern dialect, your rituals, even in the names of places and people. If I can find the right patterns, I might be able to reconstruct what was lost." Lyris's silver eyes narrowed slightly, her bioluminescent markings dimming to a faint pulse. "Our language is more than words, Dr. Carter. It's sacred, a connection to our ancestors. What you're proposing, it's not just an academic exercise." Elias stopped, adjusting his glasses as he met her gaze. "And that's why I'm here. To honor that connection. To help you uncover what's been hidden for centuries. Don't think of me as an outsider. Think of me as someone who respects the past as much as you do." For a moment, Lyris said nothing. Then, with a curt nod, she turned and continued walking. Elias couldn't tell if he had made progress in earning her trust, or if she simply wanted the conversation to end. The temple revealed. When they finally reached the clearing, Elias's breath caught in his throat. The temple was enormous, its towering black stone structure partially obscured by dense vegetation. Vines draped over its surface like ancient scars, their bright blue flowers glowing faintly in the twilight. Intricate carvings covered every visible inch of the temple, depicting scenes of Arkini life long past, hunters with energy spears, gatherings beneath the twin suns of Zareth, and what appeared to be rituals involving the stars. Despite the wear of time, the temple exuded a sense of power. Elias felt small in its shadow, as though the structure itself was watching him. "This is the Temple of Arindra," Lyris said, her voice softening as she approached the entrance. Her fingers traced the carvings near the doorway with reverence. It was built during the first age of Ascension, long before the Arkini joined the stars. "Our records say it was a place of learning and communion with the divine." "Looks like there's a lot to learn here," Elias said, stepping closer to inspect the carvings. He noticed a repeating pattern etched into the stone, a series of symbols that looked like constellations, arranged in a circular formation. "Do you recognize these?" Lyris glanced at the symbols, her expression thoughtful. "They're old, pre-Arcanth. Some of them resemble star maps, but the others..." She trailed off, her brow furrowing. "They don't match anything I've seen before." Elias's curiosity deepened. Pulling out his datapad, he began scanning the symbols, capturing high-resolution images for later analysis. Every piece of information helps. Even if these symbols don't seem familiar, they could hold the key to understanding the context of your ancestors' language. Lyris watched him work, her skepticism fading slightly as she saw his meticulous approach. Despite her reservations, She couldn't deny his dedication. The first discovery. As the team moved deeper into the temple, the air grew cooler, and the walls seemed to hum faintly, as if resonating with an ancient energy. Lyris led the way, her bioluminescent markings glowing brighter to illuminate the path. The deeper they went, the more intricate the carvings became, transitioning from simple depictions of daily life to more abstract, symbolic designs. In the central chamber, they found what appeared to be an archive, a massive hall filled with rows of stone tablets, each etched with the same mysterious symbols they had seen outside. The air was thick with the scent of aged stone and faint traces of something metallic. In the center of the chamber stood a pedestal, its surface inscribed with a large, circular glyph that pulsed faintly with light. "This is incredible," Elias said, his voice barely above a whisper. He stepped forward, his fingers hovering over one of the tablets. "These carvings, they're in pristine condition. It's like they were preserved intentionally." Lyris approached the pedestal, her expression guarded. "This is the heart of Arindra," she said. "Our records describe it as a repository of knowledge, but no one has ever been able to activate it." Elias turned to her, his eyes lighting up. "What if it's a linguistic interface? If the Arkini used it to store their knowledge, it might respond to their language." "Perhaps," Lyris said cautiously, "but Arkanth has been dead for millennia. Even I only know fragments of it." Elias smiled. "Then it's a good thing I've spent years studying ancient languages." Lyris hesitated, then nodded. "Do what you must, but be careful." Elias approached the pedestal, his heart pounding. The glyph seemed to pulse in response to his presence, its light growing brighter as he reached out to touch it. Taking a deep breath, he spoke the first phrase of reconstructed Arkanth he had learned, a simple greeting used in ancient rituals. The effect was immediate. The glyph flared with light, and the entire chamber seemed to come alive. The tablets began to glow, their symbols shifting and rearranging as if responding to an unseen command. A low hum filled the air, growing louder until it resolved into a single, clear voice. "You speak the language of our ancestors?" Lyris's voice trembled, her silver eyes wide with shock. The glow of her markings brightened, reflecting her astonishment. Elias turned to her, equally stunned. "I think I just did." The voice continued, speaking in a dialect of Arkanth that was faster and more complex than anything Elias had studied. He struggled to keep up, his mind racing as he parsed the ancient words. "It's a welcome message," he said, his voice filled with wonder. "It's greeting us as seekers of knowledge." Lyris stepped closer, her skepticism replaced by awe. "This has never happened before. How could you dash?" "I don't know," Elias admitted, his hands trembling as he touched the glowing pedestal. "But this is just the beginning." As the chamber filled with light, Elias and Lyris realized that they had uncovered something far greater than they had anticipated, a connection to the past that could change everything they thought they knew about the Arkini people. And as the ancient voice continued to speak, one thing became clear. The temple wasn't just a repository of knowledge. It was a call to action. Chapter 2. Echoes of the Past. The chamber pulsed with an ethereal light, illuminating the intricate carvings on the walls and casting shifting patterns on the ceiling. The voice from the pedestal spoke again, resonating through the hall like a chorus of whispers and echoes. Lyris Vanna stood frozen, her glowing markings brighter than ever as she stared at the pedestal in disbelief. You're translating it," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. Her wide silver eyes flicked between Elias and the glowing glyphs. "No one has spoken Arkanth fluently in millennia. How are you doing this?" Elias's mind raced. The words spoken by the pedestal weren't exactly the Arkanth he had studied. They were faster, more lyrical, and woven with complexities he hadn't encountered before. But there were patterns, connections to the fragments he had reconstructed during years of study. It was like solving a puzzle where the pieces rearranged themselves the moment he touched them. "I'm not sure," Elias admitted, his voice tinged with awe. "The language is similar to what I studied, but not identical. I think it's adapting to me as I speak, like it's meeting me halfway." "Adapting?" Lyris's tone carried a mix of fascination and suspicion. She moved closer to the pedestal, her bioluminescent skin casting faint shadows on the floor. "This shouldn't be possible. Even the most skilled linguists of my people couldn't awaken this temple." Elias glanced at her, a small smile tugging at his lips. Sometimes, the outsider sees what the insider overlooks. Lyris gave him a sharp look, but her curiosity overrode her irritation. What is it saying now? Elias focused on the pedestal, the glowing glyphs shifting as the ancient voice continued. His brow furrowed as he pieced together the meaning. It's a message, he said slowly. A warning. It's describing something called the HFY shard, an artifact hidden deep within this temple. According to the voice, the shard contains knowledge, power, and the last will of the Arcani ancestors. Lyris's breath hitched. The HFY shard is a myth, a story told to children. It's said to hold the essence of our people's greatest scholars and mystics, but no one has ever proven its existence. Elias gestured to the glowing pedestal. Then why would this archive mention it? My guess is, it's real and it's here. A path revealed. The glyphs on the pedestal shifted again, forming a map of the temple. A faint line of light traced a path from their current location to a hidden chamber deep below the surface. The route wound through narrow corridors and ancient machinery, eventually terminating in a vast, circular room. This is it, Elias said, pointing to the glowing endpoint. The shard is there. Lyris hesitated, her gaze fixed on the map. Her bioluminescent markings dimmed slightly, betraying her unease. If the shard is real, it's been hidden for a reason. There are stories warnings about the dangers of meddling with our ancestors' legacy. And yet, your people built this temple to preserve it, Elias countered. Whatever the HFY shard holds, your ancestors thought it was important enough to protect for thousands of years. Don't you think it's worth finding out why? Lyris's lips pressed into a thin line, but she couldn't deny the logic in his words. If we're going to do this, we need to be careful. There could be traps, defenses dash. As if on cue, the pedestal emitted a sharp pulse of light, and the chamber trembled. Ancient mechanisms hidden within the walls groaned to life, and the air grew heavy with the hum of energy. Elias and Lyris exchanged a wary glance. That can't be good, Elias said. The pedestal's voice returned, faster and more urgent. Elias struggled to keep up, translating in real time. It's saying the temple's defenses are activating. It detected unauthorized access. Something about an ancient protocol. Defenses? Lyris's eyes widened. We need to move. Now. Descent into danger. Following the glowing map, Elias and Lyris navigated the twisting corridors of the temple. The walls, once silent and inert, now pulsed with an ominous red light. Strange noises echoed through the hall's clanking metal, hissing steam, and a low, rhythmic pounding that sounded like the heartbeat of the ancient structure itself. What kind of defenses are we talking about? Elias asked, his voice tight with tension. Lyris glanced back at him, her expression grim. If the stories are true, the temple is equipped with constructs, automated guardians built by our ancestors. They're relentless and programmed to eliminate intruders. Great, Elias muttered. Let's hope they're as rusty as this place looks. As if in response, a deafening roar echoed down the corridor ahead. Lyris froze, her glowing markings flaring with alarm. That's not a construct, she said, her voice barely audible. That's alive. The source of the noise emerged moments later, a massive, quadrupedal creature with obsidian black scales and glowing red eyes. Its claws scraped against the stone floor as it advanced, steam hissing from vents along its back. The creature snarled, revealing rows of jagged teeth. What is that? Elias whispered, his voice trembling. A guardian beast, Lyris replied, gripping the hilt of her plasma blade. They were supposed to be extinct. Supposed to be? Elias shot back, panic rising. The beast lunged, and Lyris moved with startling speed. Her plasma blade ignited with a sharp hiss, its blue glow cutting through the dim corridor. She sidestepped the creature's charge and slashed at its flank, but the blade barely left a mark on its armored hide. Run, she shouted at Elias. I'll hold it off. Elias hesitated, torn between his instinct to flee and his desire to help. Then his eyes caught a faint shimmer on the wall, a series of glowing glyphs similar to those on the pedestal. An idea sparked in his mind. Hold on, he yelled, scrambling toward the glyphs. I think I can deactivate it. Lyris dodged another swipe from the beast, her movements precise but desperate. Whatever you're doing, do it fast. Elias reached the glyphs and quickly traced the patterns with his fingers, speaking the arcant words he had learned from the pedestal. The symbols flared brightly, and the air filled with a sharp, resonating tone. The beast froze mid-charge, its glowing eyes dimming. With a final, metallic groan, it collapsed to the floor, lifeless. Lyris stared at Elias, her chest heaving as she deactivated her blade. "How did you dash?" "The glyphs," Elias said, his voice shaky but triumphant. "They're part of the temple's control system. I think I just issued a shutdown command." Lyris's expression was a mix of astonishment and grudging respect. "You're full of surprises, Dr. Carter." Elias managed a weak smile. "Let's just hope I have a few more left." The Shard's chamber. After what felt like an eternity, they reached the final chamber. The door was massive, its surface adorned with the same constellations and symbols they had seen throughout the temple. As Elias approached, the glyphs began to glow, and the door slowly slid open with a deep, resonating hum. Inside, the chamber was bathed in a soft, golden light. At its center stood the HFY Shard crystalline structure that seemed to pulse with its own inner energy. It floated above a pedestal, its surface etched with shifting patterns that defied comprehension. Lyris approached the shard cautiously, her eyes wide with wonder. "It's real," she whispered. The stories were true. Elias stepped beside her, his gaze fixed on the artifact. "This isn't just a relic. It's alive." As he reached out to touch the shard, the room was filled with a blinding light. A voice different from the one on the pedestal spoke, deep and resonant. "Seekers of knowledge," it said, "you have awakened the legacy of the Arcani. Will you honor it, or destroy it?" Elias and Lyris exchanged a tense glance. Whatever happened next, their choices would determine the fate of an ancient legacy and perhaps the galaxy itself. Chapter 3. The Voice of the Ancestors. The chamber was alive with energy. The blinding golden light emanating from the HFY Shard reflected off the black stone walls, casting intricate patterns that seemed to move in harmony with the resonating voice. The air grew dense, humming with an ancient power that seemed to reach into their very souls. "Seekers of knowledge," the voice repeated, echoing in their minds. "You have awakened the legacy of the Arcani. Will you honor it, or destroy it?" Elias's heart pounded as he stared at the floating shard. It pulsed rhythmically, almost like a heartbeat, and the glyphs carved into its crystalline surface shifted with every pulse. His academic curiosity screamed at him to analyze, study, and understand, but a deeper instinct whispered caution. Beside him, Lyris Vanna stood frozen, her bioluminescent markings glowing brighter than ever. Her silver eyes flickered with emotions Elias couldn't fully interpret: wonder, fear, and perhaps even reverence. "This is impossible," Lyris whispered, her voice trembling. "The shard shouldn't exist. It's a myth." "Looks pretty real to me," Elias muttered, stepping closer to the shard. The voice seemed to grow louder as he approached, its tone deep and resonant, as though it came from the temple itself. "Wait," Lyris said sharply, grabbing his arm. "We don't know what we're dealing with. The HFY Shard isn't just a relic, it's said to hold the essence of our ancestors. Their knowledge, their power, and their judgment." "Judgment?" Elias echoed, turning to her. "What do you mean?" Lyris hesitated, her gaze fixed on the shard. "The legends say the shard was created to safeguard the wisdom of the first ancestors, but it was also meant to test those who sought its power. Only those deemed worthy could access its secrets." Elias frowned. "And what happens if we're not deemed worthy?" Lyris's silence was answer enough. "A test begins." The voice from the shard grew louder, filling the chamber with its commanding presence. The golden light intensified, forcing Elias and Lyris to shield their eyes. "You stand before the legacy of the Arcani," the voice declared. "To claim its knowledge, you must prove your intentions. Speak your truths." Elias squinted against the light, his mind racing. "What does it mean, speak our truths?" Lyris stepped forward cautiously, her markings dimming slightly as her fear gave way to determination. "I think it's asking us why we're here, what we seek. It wants to know if we're worthy." Elias swallowed hard. He had spent his life chasing knowledge, But now that he stood on the brink of uncovering a long-lost legacy, he realized the weight of his actions. This wasn't just an academic pursuit. It was something far greater. The voice addressed Lyris first. "Child of the Arcani, what brings you here? Do you seek to honor your ancestors, or to claim their power?" Lyris's markings flared as she took a deep breath. "I seek to understand. My people have lost so much of who we were. The ancient ways, the language of our ancestors, they're fading into myth. I want to bring that knowledge back, to help my people reconnect with our heritage." The shard pulsed, its light softening slightly. "Your intentions are noble, but do you possess the strength to wield the truth? The path of knowledge is fraught with peril." Lyris straightened, her voice steady. "I do. I've spent my life searching for answers. I won't stop now." The shard seemed to consider her words, its glow flickering in a rhythmic pattern. Then, it turned its attention to Elias. "Human," the voice said, its tone shifting to one of curiosity. "You are not of the Arcani. What right have you to seek the legacy of our people?" Elias hesitated, the weight of the question pressing down on him. He glanced at Lyris, who nodded encouragingly, then stepped forward. "I'm here to learn," he said, his voice firm. "Your language, your history, it's a bridge to the past, one that could teach us all something about ourselves. I don't want to take anything from you. I want to help preserve what's been lost." The shard pulsed again, its glow fluctuating. "Your kind is young and reckless, driven by ambition. How can we trust that your intentions are pure?" Elias clenched his fists, meeting the shard's light head-on. "Because I believe in the power of knowledge. It's not just for me, it's for everyone. If we don't learn from the past, we're doomed to repeat its mistakes." For a moment, the chamber fell silent. Then, the voice spoke again, softer this time. "Your words ring true, human. But words alone are not enough. The truth must be proven." The trial. The light from the shard flared once more, and the ground beneath their feet trembled. The chamber shifted, its walls dissolving into shimmering light. Elias and Lyris found themselves standing in an endless void, surrounded by floating glyphs and glowing symbols. "What's happening?" Elias asked, his voice echoing in the emptiness. "The trial has begun," Lyris said, her markings glowing faintly. "The shard is testing us." The voice returned, its tone resonating with an almost divine authority. "You will face the choices of the past. Show us that you understand their weight." The void around them shifted, and a scene began to form, a vision of the ancient Arcani civilization. Towering cities made of black stone and glowing crystals stretched across the horizon, their beauty marred by the chaos of war. Arcani warriors clashed in the streets, their weapons blazing with destructive energy. Elias and Lyris stood in the center of the chaos, watching as the vision unfolded. "This must be the war of division," Lyris said, her voice heavy with sorrow. "It's the conflict that nearly destroyed my people during the First Age." The voice spoke again. "The war of division was born of arrogance and fear. The Arcani sought to control what they could not understand, and their hubris led to devastation. What would you do, faced with such a choice?" A figure appeared before them, an Arcani general clad in shimmering armor. In his hands, he held a glowing artifact similar to the shard. "This device holds the power to end the war," the general said, his voice filled with desperation. "But it comes at a cost. It will destroy our enemies, and our own people." Elias's breath caught. "It's asking us to decide." The voice of the shard whispered in their ears. "The burden of knowledge is the burden of choice. What will you sacrifice to preserve the future?" The choice. Elias and Lyris exchanged a tense glance. The vision felt real, the weight of the decision pressing down on them. "If we choose to use the artifact," Lyris said, her voice trembling, "we end the war, but at the cost of countless lives. If we don't, the war continues," Elias finished, his throat dry. "And the suffering goes on." The general held the artifact out to them, his expression pleading. "Decide." Elias closed his eyes, his mind racing. The trial wasn't just about knowledge, it was about understanding the consequences of power. The choices of the past had shaped the present, and now, they were being asked to bear that same weight. "We don't use it," Elias said finally, his voice steady. "The cost is too high. Ending the war isn't worth destroying everything in the process." Lyris hesitated, then nodded. I agree. The only way forward is to find another path. The moment they spoke, the vision dissolved, and the chamber reformed around them. The shard pulsed with a bright, golden light, and the voice returned, filled with a tone of approval. You have chosen wisely. The legacy of the Arcani is not one of power, but of understanding. You have proven yourselves worthy. The shard began to glow brighter, its energy radiating outward. Elias and Lyris shielded their eyes as the light engulfed them. The legacy revealed. When the light faded, Elias and Lyris found themselves back in the central chamber. The HFY shard hovered before them, its glow softer now, almost welcoming. The voice spoke one final time. The knowledge of the Arcani is now yours. Use it wisely, for it is both a gift and a responsibility. As the shard's energy flowed into them, Elias felt a surge of understanding fragments of the ancient language, the history of the Arcani, and the lessons of their ancestors filled his mind. Lyris's markings flared brightly as tears streamed down her face. It's beautiful, she whispered. Our ancestors. Their voices are still with us. Elias smiled, his heart filled with awe. And now, we can share their story. Together, they stepped away from the shard, carrying with them the legacy of a lost civilization and the hope that its lessons would guide the future. Chapter 4. Guardians of the Legacy. The light of the HFY shard dimmed, but its glow remained constant, a silent reminder of the ancient knowledge now entrusted to Elias and Lyris. The air in the chamber was heavy with reverence, the energy of countless generations pressing against their skin. Both stood in stunned silence, processing the weight of what they had just experienced. The voice of the shard echoed once more, softer now, almost paternal. You have passed the trial. You have shown understanding, restraint, and respect for the choices of the past. This knowledge is yours to preserve and protect. But beware, power and wisdom invite envy and conflict. Choose your allies carefully, for the legacy you now hold will reshape the stars. Elias and Lyris exchanged a glance. The weight of the shard's words settled in their hearts, its warning impossible to ignore. The path back. Lyris was the first to break the silence. We have what we came for, she said, her voice steadier than Elias expected. But the shard's warning wasn't just about the knowledge we've gained, it's about the dangers ahead. Others will come for this. Elias nodded, adjusting his pack where his datapad now contained partial copies of the shard's knowledge. We need to make sure this doesn't fall into the wrong hands. The Coalition will want to study this, but I'm not sure if they can be trusted to treat it with the care it deserves. Lyris's bioluminescent markings pulsed faintly. You think humans will exploit it? Elias hesitated. Not just humans. Any species Arcani included could see this as a path to power instead of understanding. What we've uncovered isn't just history. It's the blueprint for an entire civilization's mistakes and triumphs. Before Lyris could respond, a loud tremor shook the chamber. Dust and debris fell from the ceiling as the once silent temple began to groan and shift. The glyphs on the walls flickered erratically, and the comforting hum of the shard turned into a sharp, discordant whine. What's happening? Elias shouted, bracing himself against the pedestal. The temple's defense systems are failing, Lyris said, her markings flaring with alarm. The shard's activation must have triggered a cascade reaction. This whole structure could collapse. As if to confirm her words, another tremor rocked the ground, and cracks began to spiderweb across the walls. Without hesitation, Lyris grabbed Elias's arm. We have to move. Now. A race against time. The journey back through the temple was a blur of chaos. The once majestic corridors were now riddled with falling debris and collapsing walls. The soft glow that had guided them earlier was gone, replaced by flickering red emergency lights that cast ominous shadows. Lyris moved with the grace and precision of a warrior, her plasma blade igniting to slice through fallen beams and debris blocking their path. Elias struggled to keep up, his heart pounding as the temple seemed to close in around them. How much farther? Elias gasped, ducking under a collapsing archway. Not far, Lyris shouted over the deafening roar of stone grinding against stone. The entrance is just ahead. Another tremor knocked them both off balance, sending Elias sprawling to the ground. As he scrambled to his feet, he noticed a faint blue glow emanating from a nearby wall. Despite the chaos, his curiosity got the better of him. "Elias!" Lyris yelled, pulling him out of his trance. "Leave it! The temple's collapsing." Reluctantly, Elias followed her, vowing to remember the glyphs he had seen. Whatever their meaning, it wasn't worth dying for now. The last stand of the Guardians. The pair burst through the temple's main entrance, just as a massive section of the ceiling caved in behind them. The jungle beyond was eerily silent, the glow of the alien plants casting an otherworldly light over the clearing. But their relief was short-lived. The ground trembled again, not from the temple this time, but from something approaching. The familiar clanking of metal and hissing of steam filled the air. Emerging from the treeline were three massive guardian constructs, their obsidian-black frames glinting in the faint light. Their glowing red eyes locked onto Elias and Lyris, and a deep, mechanical voice echoed from the lead construct. "You carry forbidden knowledge. Surrender it, or be destroyed." Elias's stomach dropped. "Great. More ancient robots." Lyris stepped forward, her plasma blade humming as it extended. "They're not robots. They're Arcani Guardian constructs, programmed to protect the shard and eliminate anyone they deem a threat." "Well, that explains why they don't look happy to see us," Elias said, pulling out his sidearm. "Any chance we can reason with them?" Lyris shook her head. "Their programming is absolute. They won't stop." The constructs advanced, their heavy footsteps shaking the ground. Lyris raised her blade, her bioluminescent markings flaring brightly as she prepared to fight. "Keep behind me. I'll hold them off." "No," Elias said, surprising even himself. "We're getting out of this together. Let me try something." Before Lyris could protest, Elias stepped forward, holding his hands up. He spoke in the language of the ancestors' Arcanth, his voice firm despite the fear in his chest. "We are not enemies," he said. "We are seekers of knowledge. The shard has judged us worthy." The lead construct paused, its glowing red eyes flickering as if processing his words. For a moment, Elias thought it might work. But then the construct raised its massive arm, a blade of energy extending from its forearm. "Judgment is irrelevant," it intoned. "Knowledge is forbidden." "Of course it didn't work," Elias muttered, diving out of the way as the construct charged. The shard's last gift. As the constructs closed in, the shard pulsed within Elias's pack, its golden light spilling out and bathing the clearing. The constructs froze mid-step, their red eyes dimming as the shard's energy engulfed them. "What's happening?" Lyris asked, shielding her eyes from the light. Elias fumbled with his pack, pulling the shard free. It hovered in the air, glowing brighter with every second. The voice of the ancestors spoke again, resonating through the clearing. "The legacy must be protected. The Guardians have failed their purpose." The shard's light intensified, and the constructs began to dissolve, their obsidian frames breaking apart into shimmering particles. Within moments, the clearing was silent again, the Guardians reduced to nothing but dust. Elias stared at the shard in awe. "It protected us." Lyris nodded slowly, her markings dimming as the tension faded. "The shard recognized you. It chose to save you." Elias lowered the shard carefully, its glow fading as it returned to dormancy. That was too close. A new purpose. Back aboard the coalition ship that had brought them to Zareth, Elias and Lyris sat in silence, the weight of their experience settling over them. The shard now rested in a secure containment unit, its glow faint but steady. "What happens now?" Elias asked, breaking the silence. Lyris sighed. "We'll present our findings to the coalition. But this knowledge, it's dangerous. If the wrong people learn about the shard, it could lead to chaos." "Then we make sure it doesn't," Elias said. "We've been entrusted with this legacy. It's our responsibility to protect it." Lyris studied him for a moment, then nodded. "You're right. The ancestors chose us for a reason." As the ship prepared to leave Zareth's orbit, Elias and Lyris stood together, gazing out at the planet below. The legacy of the Arcani was safe for now, but their journey was far from over. They had been chosen as guardians of the past, and their task was just beginning.